6 verse 1. Now Jericho was straitly shut up because of the children of Israel. None went out and none came in. And the Lord said unto Joshua, See, I have given into thine hand Jericho, and the king thereof, and the mighty men of valor. And ye shall compass the city, all ye men of war, and go round about the city once. Thus shalt thou do 6 days. And the 7 priests shall bear before the ark 7 trumpets of ram's horns. And the 7th day ye shall compass the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow with the trumpets. And it shall come to pass that when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when ye hear the sound of the trumpet, all the people shall shout with a great shout, and the wall of the city shall fall down flat, and the people shall ascend up, every man straight before him. And Joshua the son of Nun called the priest, and said unto them, Take up the ark of the covenant, let the 7 priests bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of the Lord. And he said unto the people, Pass on, and compass the city, and let him that is armed pass on before the ark of the Lord. And it came to pass, when Joshua had spoken unto the people, that the 7 priests bearing the 7 trumpets of ram's horns passed on before the Lord, and blew the trumpets, and the ark of the covenant of the Lord followed them. And the armed men went before the priests that blew at the trumpets, and the reward came after the ark, the priests going on and blowing with the trumpets. And Joshua had commanded the people, saying, Ye shall not shout, nor make any noise with your voice, neither shall any word proceed out of your mouth, until the day that I bid you shout, then shall ye shout. So the ark of the Lord compassed the city, going about it once, and they came into the camp, and lodged in the camp. And Joshua rose early in the morning, and the priests took up the ark of the Lord. And the 7 priests, bearing 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of the Lord, went on continually, and blew the trumpets, and the armed men went before them. But the reward came after the ark of the Lord, the priests going on and blowing with the trumpets. And the 2nd day they compassed the city once, and returned into the camp. So did they 6 days. And it came to pass on the 7th day that they rose early about the dawning of the day, and compassed the city after the same manner 7 times. Only on that day they compassed the city 7 times. And it came to pass at the 7th time, when the priests blew with the trumpets, Joshua said unto the people, Shout, for the Lord hath given you the city. And the city shall be accursed, even it and all that are therein, to the Lord. Only Rahab the harlot shall live, she and all that are with her in the house, because she hid the messengers that we sent. And ye, in any wise, keep yourselves from the accursed thing, lest ye make yourselves accursed, when ye take of the accursed thing, and make the camp of Israel a curse, and trouble it. But all the silver and the gold, and vessels of brass and iron, are consecrated unto the Lord. They shall come into the treasury of the Lord. So the people shouted when the priest blew with the trumpet. And it came to pass, when the people heard the sound of the trumpet, and the people shouted with a great shout, that the wall fell down flat, so that the people went up into the city, every man straight before him, and they took the city. And they utterly destroyed all that was in the city, both man and woman, young and old, and ox and sheep and ass, with the edge of the sword. And then skip down to verse 27. This is where we're going to end for our reading this evening. Verse 27. So the Lord was with Joshua, and his fame was noised throughout all the country. Let's go ahead and have a word of prayer. Seated. The children of Israel, as we know, have just spent the last 40 plus years wandering the desert, seemingly aimlessly. Literally wandering around until they die because of their unbelief when Moses had sent the 12 spies in land. So now those people are gone. Moses has just died, and Joshua is now the one leading this show. But this is going to be no easier than what Moses faced. You know, Moses had to lead people around in the desert. That's going to be hard. We know how much the people complained against God and against Moses anytime things weren't as good as they perceived they ought to be. So that was hard, no doubt about that. But as Joshua steps in, with him steps or a new era. All of a sudden things are changing, which presents some major challenges. For starters, it's new, and people don't like new. Even if it's a good new, people don't like new. When you think about it, it's an automatic reaction to new is to fight against it. You know, you have things like the old saying, a calf at a new gate. They don't have that saying for no reason. I've worked with cattle a little bit. We grew up next to a dairy farm. My brother and I got paid $5 a day and a huge lunch at Grandma Burkhart's house every day, and to work on their dairy farm. And as a 6-year-old boy, you know, that seemed rich. I could figure it out. One day I could buy 6 Hot Wheels. You know, this is good stuff. Life was really good, and I got ice cream every day at lunch. So, you know, things were going good. Working on a farm, got to do all sorts of cool things. You know, one summer, Bo and I and our friends, you're talking a 6-year-old, a 7-year-old, and an 8-year-old, were hired to spend the entire summer walking the fence line of the farm with machetes cutting down thistle. 3 kids, 6, 7, and 8, walking around 250 acres swinging machetes. You know, what could possibly go wrong? This is good. And then, to make that better, I was the youngest, so Mr. Burkhart often felt bad for me having to walk around with them and would pick me up and let me drive the tractor all around the field. So, you know, life was good. But working on a farm, one of the things we did often was helped with the cows. So I've seen a calf at a new gate thing personally, and it's very true. That gate looks just like all of the others. They've walked through, you know, 500 gates before that, but that gate is new, so you nearly have to push them through. And pushing an animal that big isn't easy. It's new, so they don't like it. But to be honest, people aren't a whole lot different. Something new comes up, and you know, we don't see something new, and we're not thrilled for, you know, some new adventure. And we aren't excited about the new possibilities. No, we look at it and we think, this is new, it has to be bad. Or at least we're going to treat it that way until it proves itself otherwise. Even if it's obviously better. I know you guys love my plumbing example, so I'm going to give one. Whether you do or not, I like them, so I'm going to keep telling them. When I first started plumbing, though, all of the water pipes, see, you should be thankful it's water pipe, not waste pipe, so it'll be a clean story. All of the water pipe was done in copper when I started. Somewhere along the line they switched over to, or they introduced PEX piping, which is what we all run now. It was easier to run, so it saved lots of time for the plumber. It was cheaper to buy, so saved money for the builder and homeowner. It was freeze-proof, so, you know, cutting down on homeowner headaches down the road, and less fittings for less potential leaks and all that. And yet, for years, most contractors refused to use it. They could not find anything negative to say about it, except it's new. And I'm not joking. I had a lot of contractors that I told them, hey, this stuff is so much better. And they, yeah, but it's new. So they wouldn't do it. Because we don't like change. It's new. Here Joshua steps in and is immediately, I mean, first of all, you have a new leader to start you off, but then is immediately going to be taking them into a new stage in their lives. You start out the book of Joshua. He's put in charge by God, chapter 1, verse 1. And by chapter 1, verse 2, he's told you're going to cross the river and start this thing. I mean, there is no time to get used to the new leader here in charge. It's new leaders here. Here we go. This is going to be new, and people aren't going to like it. But not only is he going to have that challenge of a new era, but also throw in there that new era includes a whole lot of fighting. You think about this immediately, again, right off the bat, Joshua steps in and says, you know, okay, fellas, we're going to cross the river into the land that your dads were too scared to go to. 40 years ago, God told your dad to go do this, and he was too chicken, so God punished him, and he's dead. Your turn. That's in essence, I mean, he starts his time leading the children of Israel, and that's it. Your dads were too scared to do this. They're dead because of that. Now you. These people, they knew that going into the promised land still meant facing giants that their dads had told them about. That their dads 40 years ago said made them look like grasshoppers. They knew that this meant, they knew entering this land means they're going to be taking those guys on. And they still knew that it meant the fortified cities and trained soldiers. They knew that this new era of life means a constant uphill battle where numbers are never in your favor. You know, I can't I can't help but think that in the 40 years of wandering, they heard the story once or twice of, we're here because we looked in there and we didn't want to face these things. And here Joshua is, you try and lead a group that knows all that. That knows that here we go, and this is going to be a battle right off the bat. I can imagine, as I was studying this, I can imagine, Joshua's rallying cry as they get ready to cross the river. I know I picture a coach for some sport. I know they're bigger, and I know they're stronger, and I know they have tall walls, and I know they're better trained, and I know they have better weapons, but there's no reason why we can't whoop these guys. People aren't going to be very excited to follow into that. People aren't going to be real excited about that. Have you ever done something that going into it you're going to fail? It's a little hard to get motivated. That's what Joshua is, from at least a worldly mindset. That's what Joshua is leading them into. By all accounts, they're going to go in and they're going to get whooped. Where we read to start this message, they've crossed over. They're getting ready to start by fighting Jericho, and Joshua sends spies in, and again, by all human accounts, they don't stand a chance. And yet here we are, or those of us in here know this story, and we read it. We know they won. How? How did a group of runaway slaves who just came out of 40 years of wandering a desert into an unknown country defeat a walled city with giants trained for war? Well, potentially giants trained for war. How did Joshua convince the people to follow him into that? And the answer is in Joshua 6, verse 27, the start of that. So the Lord was with Joshua. God was with him. It wasn't Joshua's motivational speaking, my rally cry. That's not what got the people to cross the river and decide to do this. There are some people that can convince others to do just about anything for them just by the way they talk. That's not what happened here. It wasn't by Joshua's brilliant military mind. It's not like he sent the spies in and found a weakness in the city that they could exploit to make it easier. It wasn't by superior training, because we'll just be honest, they didn't have that. The only reason that Joshua could lead them to this victory was because God was with him. Tonight, for myself, I simply titled the message, God in the Impossible Battles. Because we all go through battles in life that seem, like Jericho, to be impossible for me to win. Times where we look at it and our enemy is bigger, they're better trained, they're more prepared, and we look at it and think, we're going to get slaughtered. But God is with us. Tonight I have three ways that I want us to see God in the impossible battle, using this example of the children of Israel fighting Jericho. The first is God in their protection. Turn back to Joshua chapter 2. We're going to start back a couple chapters. Joshua chapter 2, verse 1, it says, And Joshua the son of Nun sent out of Shittim 2 men to spy secretly, saying, Go view the land, even Jericho. And they went and came into an harlot's house named Rahab, and lodged there. And it was told the king of Jericho, saying, Behold, there came men in hither tonight of the country of Israel to search out the country. And the king of Jericho sent out Rahab, saying, Bring forth the men that are come to thee, which are entered into thy house, for they be come to search out all the country. And the woman took the 2 men and hid them, and said thus, There came men unto me, but I wist not whence they were. And it came to pass about the time of shutting of the gate, when it was dark, that the men went out. Whither the men went, I wot not. Pursue after them quickly, for ye shall overtake them. But she had brought them up to the roof of the house, and hid them with the stalks of flax, which she had laid in order upon the roof. Now think about this. You've just come into the land. This is before where we read in chapter 6. Obviously, 2 comes before 6. But they've just come into the land. You're preparing to attack this city, but first you're going to spy it out. The king hears that the spies are there, sends out soldiers to search for him, and Rahab is really put in a really tough spot. Because she has to choose, do I stay loyal to my people? I mean, presumably, this is her king who's looking for the spies. We know that she lived in the city, so, spies checking out the city to plan an attack on the city you live in has a pretty major effect on you. We know that her family is in the city because later she brings them into her house to be saved in the attack. Taking these spies in, means betraying your family, betraying your city, the government that you're under. She could have sent the spies out of her house. She says to those who came looking for him that they came and left, and I don't know where they went. That could have been honest. They could have come and she could have said, look, I want no part of this. Go. I don't want to be involved. Please just leave. I don't want to be in the middle of this. She could have turned the spies in. I mean, she had them go hide on the roof. How hard would it have been to tell the soldiers, hey, they're up on the roof? She could have. When the king sent men to her house, it wouldn't have been hard to have told them, yep, they're on my roof. Go get them. She had to choose, do I stay loyal to my people or do I help these men, these strangers? And she helps them not yet knowing that they would spare her life when they attacked. She protected them, not because she was a moral person and it seemed right. I mean, I don't have to be too blunt, but the Bible clearly says Rahab the harlot. She didn't take these men in and protect them because she was just a good person. It's not like it was just, the nice thing to do. She didn't protect them because they asked her to. Nowhere does the Bible say, they rushed in. There are men after us. Please hide us. That wasn't her reason. She didn't protect them because she hated her family or her city or her king. And I know that because the Bible very clearly tells us why she provided them protection. In chapter 2, verse 9, she said unto the men, I know that the Lord hath given you the land, and that your terror is fallen upon us, and that all the inhabitants of the land faint because of you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when ye came out of Egypt, and what ye did unto the two kings of the Amorites that were on the other side Jordan, Sihon and Og, whom ye utterly destroyed. And as soon as we had heard these things, our hearts did melt, neither did there remain any more courage in any man because of you. For the Lord your God, He is God in heaven above and earth below. Verse 9. I'm going to point that out again, highlight that. And she said unto them, I know that the Lord hath given you the land. She protected them because of their God. This woman realized something that their fathers 40 years previously hadn't gotten figured out. She realized something that most Christians now haven't figured out, and that is when God promises something, it's done. Think about this. They hadn't even had their first battle yet. They hadn't had their first battle in this promised land, and notice what she says. Not that you're going to try and take over the land, not that God will give you the land, not that in time it will be yours. She said, hath given you the land. That's past tense. She already has it figured out that this thing isn't up for debate. And it doesn't matter what our armies do, God's already won. The same is true for us. We want things like victory over sin. Hear me out to the end of the statement. God isn't going to give you victory over sin because He already has. He already died on the cross for that sin. The battle's already been won. And yet we still fight battles that have already been won instead of realizing, oh, God already did this. Or we want victory over some sort of battle in our life, but guess what? God's already won. If we could grasp a hold of this idea, it would save us a ton of pointless battles in our life. I did some research for this message. The Civil War. Obviously, communication wasn't what it is now. But in looking up, there were at least, and I say at least because one place I read 6, one place I read 8, but at least 6 battles fought in the Civil War after it was over. General Lee had already signed the surrender. The war was over. But these men didn't know. They didn't realize. There was the Battle of Mooresville Station, the Battle of West Point, Battle of Columbus, Battle of Anderson, Battle of Palomino Ranch, and CCS Shenandoah raids. And I didn't get the opportunity to look up how many men died or were injured in those battles, but there were undoubtedly men injured and killed for no reason. The war was over. What they did wasn't going to affect it one way or another. It was over. It had already been won. And yet they were still fighting because they didn't know. How many injuries must we sustain because we didn't know what Rahab, or because we don't know what Rahab knew? Be a message in itself, knowing what Rahab knew. But because of God, these spies were protected. We can clearly see God in their protection. We can see God in the plan. We read chapter 6. I'm not going to read over it again, but God's plan that He gives, that you're going to walk around the city once for 6 days. And then on the 7th day, you're going to walk around it 7 times. Those first 6 days, you won't make a sound. You're just going to walk around it once. Go home. The 7th day, you're going to walk around it 7 times. At the very end, the priests are going to blow their trumpet, 7 whole trumpets, and then the rest of you are going to yell. You know, militarily, this doesn't work. Just, in case you were wondering, this doesn't work. I've already mentioned some of this, but let's examine this for a moment. You have a fortified city. Jericho is designed to withstand an attack. So you're automatically starting off with a disadvantage. Having walls means that getting in is harder. harder. So before you can actually fight people, you have to fight your way in while they're fighting you. But walls also means, your enemy has the high ground. I'll oversimplify this, but it's a lot easier to chuck a rock down on someone than it is to chuck a rock up on somebody. And I know that's simplifying it, but this is a major disadvantage. And if that wasn't enough, you have trained soldiers, again, potentially giants. I don't know that any of them were here, but when they came out from spying the land, they talked about the giants. At the very least, you're talking about an army, and an army that's specifically trained to protect this walled city. And you're going to attack it with what are essentially nomadic sons of a bunch of runaway slaves. There is nothing militarily that shows any sort of advantage for Joshua or the people. For that matter, if we leave God out of the equation, there is nothing that even shows them having a chance. You're going to die before you ever get to the walls. And then God's plan is, I want you to line the people up. Like I said, first 6 days, do nothing. Walk around the city, go home. 7th day, we're going to line up. At the end of the 7th, we're going to have 7 trumpets blown and yell. Can you imagine when God told Joshua this? I can picture the conversation. God telling him this, line the people up. And Joshua, okay. And then we attack? God, no. Then you have the priests blow their trumpet. Oh, and Joshua, okay. Then what? And God tells him, well then, have the people yell. And Joshua just standing there looking confused. That's it? We're going to blow 7 trumpets and yell? What's that going to do? This plan even to a man who may not have been a military leader at this point, would have seemed like a suicide mission. Let's just yell and alert them. Hey, we're going to attack now. Here we come. Prepare yourself. You're facing what seems like an impossible battle already. And then this is God's plan? It wouldn't have made sense. And I can see someone hearing it and thinking, why did God lead us out here just to have us slaughtered in the first battle? Because His plan just doesn't make any sense, but God was in the plan. But how often is that true for you and I, that God's plan just doesn't make sense? I was talking to someone this week about something. Is that vague enough? Someone about something. And the comment was made that I know God has a reason, I just wish I knew what it was. And how, often we don't until way further down the line. God has a plan, and often we look at that plan and don't see why He's doing what He's doing, why He's bringing us through what we're facing. It just doesn't make sense. We don't see how it's going to work, but it's still His plan. We still need to submit to it. Joshua could have heard this and told God, I don't think this is a good idea. Maybe we'll just come up with a backup idea. Maybe I'll just come, God, I appreciate it, but we'll just figure out our own way to defeat this city. And we hear that and we think, well, Joshua would have been dumb to do that, except we do. God, I know that's your plan, but I'm going to do this instead. Because of it, we end up taking a defeat in a war that's already been won. We can clearly see God in the protection of the spies. We can clearly see God in the plan. And then lastly tonight, we can see God in the product. Look at chapter 6, verse 20. Verse 20, it says, "So the people shouted when the priest blew the trumpets, and it came to pass when the people heard the sound of the trumpet, and the people shouted with a great shout, that the wall fell down flat, so that the people went up into the city, every man straight before him, and they took the city." Simply put, it worked. The impossible battle, the overwhelming odds against them, the walled cities and the trained soldiers, what would have seemed like ridiculous plan, and it all worked. The walls fell from a bunch of people yelling? No. The walls fell from a bunch of people obeying God. Amen. And they didn't just fall. They didn't just topple over and lay there. I firmly believe that they, in my mind, turned to dust. The Bible doesn't tell us that they climbed over rubble into the city. It just says that they went straight before them. The wall that was no more. It worked. The walls fell. The Israelites charged into the no longer walled city. The Bible says that they slew them with the sword, which couldn't have been too hard. I can only imagine that everyone in the city was in a state of shock. You think about it, what just happened? There's a bunch of people outside. They all started screaming like a bunch of lunatics, and now our wall is gone. You just went from, in the blink of an eye, you went from I am inside the safety of my walled city to there's an enemy rushing me. It worked in a way that only God could do. The impossible battle was won because God was with Joshua. Impossible battle was won simply because, verse 27, the Lord was with Joshua. And here's the idea that I want to get across this evening, and I'll conclude the message, that we sometimes face impossible battles, or so they seem. But God is there. He'll protect us. He has a plan, and He will produce. The battle's already won if we'll just rely on Him. If we'll just trust that God is there, we won't need to fight a bunch of pointless battles. I'll end with I was going to stop using my rhyme, but Brother Wilder put it up on the reader board, so now I have to keep saying it throughout the entire series. I'll end with that. In the impossible battles, don't despair. God's there. Let's pray.